The Pittsburgh Steelers dump some news on the eve of a snow dump in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Steelers hire a new head coach. New coach, same coach, kind of the same vibe. I'm Mike Asti here, and this is another edition of Mic Drop, made possible by the Believe Network, available everywhere you get your podcasts and on SiriusXM. And I'm here to drop the mic in a little bit of my live reaction of sorts. The night of the Steelers deciding to hire Mike McCarthy as their new head coach. So the same Mike McCarthy that beat the Steelers when he was with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers was his quarterback. The last time the Steelers were in the Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin, many moons ago at this point, ends up now becoming the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The local boy, the Pittsburgh kid, finally gets his dream job. Despite winning that championship, this was his dream job to coach the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin ends up getting his dream job. He impressed the Steelers enough with his PowerPoints of all the quarterbacks he's helped groom, Hall of Famers, of course, from Joe Montana to Rodgers to now. Maybe Rodgers again. We'll get into that, I guess. As he is now going to be the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. McCarthy and the Steelers agreeing to a 5-year deal. And it has now been announced. It is happening. Mike McCarthy at 62 years young, or 62 years old, the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. The oldest coach they've ever hired, by far, by the way. The oldest prior as a head coach was 57 years old, way back in the 40s. The whole plan of hiring a coach that you can work with and build with and groom and work with and be married to for years, that's out the window with Mike McCarthy. 5-year deal. Say he gets through those 5 years. He's not going to touch the Cowher, Tomlin, Chuck Noll tenures. Chuck Noll hired at 37, and at the time, the youngest coach in the NFL. Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin both hired at 34. And there were young coordinators on both sides of the ball, but of course on defense, the spot the Steelers love, that maybe could have been that next guy, could have fit the bill of that 30-something head coach, elevating him to be your next guy for many, many years, that you're going to be loyal to through the better and the worse. Nope, not this time. Not this time. The Steelers go off script for the very first time in their history, really. Certainly with somebody with the last name Rooney owning the team. And they bring in a 62-year-old. Yes, he has a ring on his finger. Yes, he's a proven coach. Yes, he's won before. Resume very similar to Mike Tomlin, though. And Mike McCarthy is the head coach. Again, Mic Drop here, Mike Asti with Believe, and available everywhere you get your podcasts. Feel free. I am streaming this on my live reaction. So again, no guest for this one. We'll have guests in the future to talk about this. I am sure on future shows I will make that happen. And, the name that everybody knew would get an interview, everyone knew would be in the mix, everyone knew would be brought up for his connection, if nothing else, ends up getting the job. Nobody knew. No colleague I talked to, no source I talked to, thought it would be this guy, thought it would be Mike McCarthy, thought he would get the job. Many even brought up that, of course, you talked to him to pick his brain. Well, you picked his brain, you liked his brain, and he now has the job. So we're going to discuss it here on this show. Feel free to chat along. This is a live reaction, but of course, this will be archived as a podcast as well if you are listening after the fact. But you already know that Mike McCarthy is the head coach at this point, hours after the decision. And here are my thoughts. You probably could already tell from the open, or if you scanned any of my thoughts on social media, they're already out there. I don't like this move. I don't like this move. I'm not excited about this move. I question anybody that really is, to be honest. And it's not just so much that the Steelers went off script, because you could argue their script's been boring and the Steelers' way has been boring and the Steelers' way hasn't worked out for many years. So maybe you want something new. I don't know if that's really what's happening here. And yet they did go off script. but I also don't like the hire in general. So let's unpack it. Number one, for a reason why I don't like the hire, and maybe this is in no order, but the first reason I don't like the hire, he's too old. He's too old. Same thing I said when people brought up Kirk Cinetti. And it's different. Mike McCarthy's had success in the NFL. Kirk Cinetti's been, obviously building a Hall of Fame resume now. Gonna walk in there. Great success in Indiana. 2 years, greatest turnaround in sports history. Wins a national title, undefeated season. Gonna be a Disney movie someday. Great coach. Nothing against him, but he is a career college guy, and I'm not so sure that college vibe of that I'm never gonna smile. All of that is gonna work in the NFL. Even though people are getting paid in college, 30-something veteran in the NFL, Cam Hayward's not going to deal with a never smile head coach. That's why some believe Belichick wouldn't work now if he was still in the NFL. That attitude, it's very, very like Belichick, Kirk Cinetti. I don't know if that's going to work. That's not the norm among coaches in the NFL. Even Andy Reid, who's the only coach, by the way, older than Mike McCarthy now in football in the NFL. He's not like that. I don't think that would work. So they're different. But yeah, I thought Kirk Cinetti was too old. Maybe this was 10 years ago. They'd give it a shot. He didn't really want the job, though. Mike McCarthy and Kirk Cinetti are both too old for this. Only one coach really wanted the job. Kirk Cinetti wanted to be a college lifer, and he's going to be and probably building a dynasty now with the Hoosiers, as insane as that still sounds, from a basketball school to now being a national champion on the football field. But Mike McCarthy wanted the job. No surprise. Again, Greenfield native, grew up a Steeler guy, always loved the Steelers. That was brought up a lot when he coached against the Steelers, of course, in the Super Bowl and beat them. Has talked fondly about the Steelers in recent years in the McAfee show while he's been out of coaching. And obviously the Rodgers connection, which again, we'll put a pin in and get to in a moment. But he's too damn old, man. 62 years old. I'm not saying you got to find the next Mike Tomlin, but 62 years old. Okay, he's not going to be there long enough. You found a Band-Aid that you're trying to put over a scar. You can't Band-Aid this roster. This team is not win now ready. This team has defensive issues still. The defense has been overrated for years. The defense allows yards left and right, allowing some of the most yards in football this past season. The defense can't stop the run. The vaunted Steelers, who always stop the run at minimum, that's gone. That's been gone for years. We saw that at the end of the season. Derrick Henry gashed them, and then go to the playoff game. The Texans ran all over Pittsburgh. Happened throughout the season. The offense has been anemic, and yeah, Arthur Smith has gone to Ohio State, as interesting as that is. And you can blame lack of receiver depth and maybe on the roster, and Rodgers was an upgrade of recent quarterbacks, but still no real running game, no real receiver depth, no explosiveness from the offense, kind of boring all the way around, even though they did get into the postseason. And that team, even with all the picks they have coming up in the draft, and the highest one being 21st, so it's not like they have an early pick in that first round, is not going to instantly go into the draft and build a championship team within that year 1 or 2 and hit the ground running, because Cowher in the Super Bowl early in his tenure, a few years in, and then, of course, Tomlin winning it in year 2 and then getting back a couple years later. Most of their early success was, yeah, they picked up where another guy left off, but it wasn't as great after that guy left off. Cowher, Tomlin did come in after a couple of years removed from Cowher's title year, but the year after was not nearly that. They were 500. And, of course, Cowher taking over for Chuck Noll when it was rough there at the end. But there were pieces there. There were players there. There were quality components there. They weren't far from contention there, of course, especially the Cowher situation. They're a couple of years removed from a championship. The situation Tomlin inherited and the situation Bill Cowher even inherited better than this situation that Mike McCarthy is now inheriting, for sure. Roster-wise, for sure. There's not a quarterback there. Even if Rodgers comes back, that's not the future guy. That's not the 5-year contract guy. That's 1 year max. And he's not somebody you're going to build with. I'm not saying the Steelers need to have a coach that's going to be there for 20 years every single time they hire somebody. Of course, Mike Tomlin was there too damn long. I would have fired him years ago. I thought he got stale years ago. And they do keep coaches longer than anybody else in pro sports really today, and that annoys some, and I get that. But that doesn't mean you go the whole other way and hire a 62-year-old that's going to be there only a few years, even if you win. Okay. The age thing is a problem for me. I'm an ageist in this, if I have to say it. Mike McCarthy is just too damn old. If he was 10 years younger, maybe given this scenario, okay. But not at 62. This feels like you're trying to put a Band-Aid over a scar. The roster's scarred. You can't put a Band-Aid for a short amount of time. You need somebody that's going to come in, that's going to build it up, that you're going to allow to have some bumpy roads, you're going to mature with, there will be a maturation process with, and then he'll be your guy for a while. That's the ideal scenario that maybe they could have got out of Chris Shula. Maybe they could have got out of Anthony Weaver. We'll never know. Again, mic drop here with Believe, available everywhere you get your podcasts and on SiriusXM. Reacting to the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy. Live reaction here on this episode of the show. And the age is a problem for me. So the age is a problem. The age is a problem. It just is. Doesn't have to be for you, but we're not even close in ages here. It's just odd. And second oldest coach in the NFL is now your head coach. It's not like everybody else has older coaches. The Raiders brought in Pete Carroll as an older coach with an accomplished resume, thinking he could do it in the short term and hit the ground running and not have to do a long rebuild with a flawed roster that had a scar. They basically tried to put a Band-Aid over a scar in Vegas. That didn't work. He's gone for a year. He's gone after a year. The Steelers are not going to fire Mike McCarthy after 1 year. They don't do that, obviously. But it's not a long-term solution. This is a Band-Aid over a scar. The roster is scarred, and you brought in a Band-Aid who's only going to be there a short amount of time based on his age. So the age thing is a problem. Separate from the age thing, you basically are going to replace Mike Tomlin with freaking Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin has won championship in the last 20 years. It was way, way back. He has 2 Super Bowl appearances, which is one more than Mike Tomlin, or one more than Mike McCarthy. So Mike Tomlin has won championship in the last 20 years. Mike McCarthy has won championship. Mike Tomlin's actually been to 2 Super Bowls. Mike McCarthy has been to 1. They both have 8 division titles. Mike McCarthy has 11 playoff wins. Tomlin has the 8. Mike McCarthy has a more recent postseason victory, but it's still been many years ago. It's still been several years ago. Mike Tomlin's last playoff win, of course, coming after the 2016 season. Mike McCarthy was just fired from the Dallas Cowboys for not winning enough in the postseason. Similar situation for Mike Tomlin. He stepped down, didn't get fired, but the fans are fed up with him not winning a playoff game in recent memory. Not enough in the postseason. And I know, by the way, Mike McCarthy's last playoff win actually just came a few years ago, but still only the one during his Dallas tenure. Yes, he had the 3 12-win seasons, but like Mike Tomlin, consistent regular season success and then a lack of postseason success. Okay? Mike McCarthy did not do enough in the postseason in recent years. Mike Tomlin did not do enough in the postseason in recent years. Mike McCarthy, championship and deep run came many years ago. Mike Tomlin's championship and deep run came many years ago. Mike McCarthy just left a place where the fan base was fed up for lack of playoff success. Mike Tomlin just stepped down from a place where the fan base is fed up with lack of playoff success, and now Mike McCarthy is going to jump aboard and replace Mike Tomlin. Their resumes are very, very similar. Their resumes are similar overall. Their resumes are similar even in recent memory. And you could argue that Mike McCarthy's recent tenure from Dallas and the end of Green Bay is better than Mike Tomlin's the last 7-8 years in Pittsburgh, where it's been 7 straight playoff losses and 5 straight blowout playoff losses, which is an NFL record, and led to him stepping down, really. If everything was hunky-dory, I'm sure he would have stayed, even though he kind of was sick of the noise. The noise wouldn't have been as loud if there was more playoff success. But Mike McCarthy still got fired for lack of playoff success from his last job. There was not enough playoff success with the Cowboys. The end of the Packers was kind of Mike Tomlin, reminiscent, where there was lack of playoff success towards the end, in the middle of Aaron Rodgers' prime, winning MVPs and not going far in the postseason. And yeah, Aaron Rodgers didn't perform in some of those playoff games, but hell, he might be the quarterback. He was just with the Steelers. Maybe he's coming back as well, and now he's 42 years old. Lack of roster management, poor roster decisions, time management decisions, in-game decisions, All these criticisms that maybe you're familiar with from the Mike Tomlin era have all been heaped on Mike McCarthy by the Cowboy fans, by the Packer fans over the last 2 decades. When he was finally removed in Green Bay, Packer fans were happy to be done with that tenure, despite knowing that he did win them a championship. While Cowboys fans maybe were excited when he was brought aboard, when he was fired there was really not many Cowboys fans that were flipping out and furious. Yeah, they had the regular season wins. They wanted more, and they moved on because of pressure to do more there. It hasn't happened, but now there's pressure in Pittsburgh. It's not the fishbowl national media situation the Cowboys are, where they're going to get talked about win, lose, or draw every single day on the mothership, but it's still a pressure cooker, and he knows this, in Pittsburgh, where the fans are fed up with losing playoff games. The fans are fed up with 10-7 seasons. The fan base is fed up with not even competing in those postseason games. The fan base is fed up with not really being a championship contender or near it for a decade. That's what Mike McCarthy's been dealing with too the last decade. That's Mike McCarthy's resume the last decade. In all reality, give or take a wild card playoff win more recently. It's too similar to Mike Tomlin. There's the age. Don't like that. Not a long-term solution. It's a Band-Aid over a scar for the roster. There's the Mike Tomlin comparison. Don't like that. I've been fed up with the Mike Tomlin tenure for the last several years, and now it's happening again. The third reason why I don't like this move, and this might expose the Steelers a little bit more, might be maybe the biggest problem here. It comes across like the Steelers, 1, went cheap, 2, went lazy, 3, went quote-unquote safe, even though it's not really safe for the fans because no one's really loving this, and 4, made their feelings about Mike Tomlin and his tenure very, very clear. What I mean by all that. So the Pittsburgh Steelers pay their players, pay TJ Watt, pay Cam Hayward. No playoff wins with TJ Watt. You could argue wasted money despite his greatness. Same with Cam Hayward, won 1 playoff game. But they don't pay the staff. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Steelers are cheap when it comes to the staff. The Steelers staff, their coaching staff, is usually among, the cheapest in the league, for lack of a better description. They don't overpay. They don't pay coaches near what some other franchises do. And yeah, they've had more success than some other franchises. Not like it's been horrible. It's not been awful. They've not had losing seasons, of course. Mike Tomlin didn't have any. Mike McCarthy, by the way, had some, despite a more recent playoff win. But they also have a small staff. There are passing game coordinators, run game coordinators. There are extra positions, extra assistant coaches. There are bigger staffs around the NFL and in major college football. The Pittsburgh Steelers don't have any of that. It's the head coach, the OC, the DC, the special teams coach, and then the other random assistant spots. It's as small as you can get. There's no specialty positions there. They go cheap with the staff. They do. Even the people that are there are not getting the highest salary they could at that exact position with another franchise. And there's no cap with the coaching staff. They could spend more with the coaching staff. They can blame whatever they want on the players, and they do spend for the players, of course. They've spent for the players, which you'd rather spend for the players than the staff if you've got to pick one. But there's nothing stopping the Pittsburgh Steelers from spending with the players, if you want to, if that works, if it makes sense, and the staff. Again, the staff salary does not hurt you against the salary cap, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have plenty of money to do this. But they go cheap with the staff. So, because Mike McCarthy is 62 years old, because Mike McCarthy has a resume similar to Mike Tomlin and has failed with now 2 stops, fired by Green Bay and fired by Dallas, and yes, he won a championship with Green Bay, but it's many years ago, and lack of playoff success in recent years. Because of all of that, Mike McCarthy, out of coaching now for a year plus, doesn't have leverage. Yeah, Tennessee talked to him, but he had no real other opportunities. If he was not the Steelers head coach, he would not be coaching again. Probably would eventually just quit it altogether and retire. Again, he's not like Tomlin, where he's a decade younger. This is 62 years old for Mike McCarthy. And despite him having no leverage, he gets this job in front of the championship games. In front of the championship games, when there are coaches that could make sense to talk to that you haven't been able to get in your building because of the playoff rules, maybe are going to be available if they lose on Sunday. You can't wait one more day to talk to those guys and get those guys in Pittsburgh? And if they win, maybe you don't want to wait 2 more weeks for the Super Bowl, but maybe you do for the betterment of your franchise. You can't wait? The timing of this feels odd. Not only the age and the similar resume to Tomlin, but the fact that Mike McCarthy had no leverage, and yet he's the guy on Saturday ahead of the conference championship games, ahead of Chris Shula maybe being available with a loss, for example. That tells me they were always set into this. That tells me that he did really impress them. They like the local connection thing they're probably going to hide from PR-wise, and that he's their guy. And maybe it's cool they went off script a little bit from the Steelers way, which hasn't worked, but not if it's going to lead to this. Not if another franchise like the Browns in your division, who usually are the laughingstock of the league, is going to outsmart you and get one of those younger coaches because they have things booked already with those guys coming into town. Maybe if they would lose, they got visits and coaching interviews booked with coaches coaching in the championship games on the hope they lose. And if they win, they still may talk to them. All while the Steelers just get in bed with Mike McCarthy before even needing to wait. Again, Mike McCarthy had no leverage. You could easily have told him, I like what you have to say. I respect you. Wait. We want to talk to Chris Shula. We want to do more interviews. We'll hit you up in another week or 2. There's no reason to rush. You're not going anywhere. If we offer you this job in March, you're going to accept it in March. Yes, you'll be behind the 8 ball, but you have no other opportunities. This is your chance to continue to coach, Mike McCarthy. He had no leverage at all. And yet, no. The Steelers decide on Saturday, January 24th, 2 days before my birthday and the day before the conference title games, to, hey, we're locked in right now. Why? Because they didn't want to hire one of those younger coaches for fear that it would force a difference of mentality they don't want to change. This is how it feels. They have a small staff. They go cheap with the staff. They don't get funky and advanced with the staff like some other franchises do because it doesn't hurt the cap. There's no passing game coordinator, run game coordinator, in addition to the quarterback's coach, running backs coach in Pittsburgh with the Steelers, like in other places now, including other winning places now in college and the pros. And Mike McCarthy is really the only coach on this market who they could tell, hey, Mike, we're not going to spend more on this staff. We're not going to give you more coaches like is done around football these days. We're not going to advance ourselves staff-wise like is done in the NFL and college these days. No, we're giving you this salary, this size staff, this situation. It'll be the norm. It's going to be Steelers way. We, Art Rooney II on down, are in charge. The buck stops with us. You're our subordinate. Of course, we're hiring you, but you don't have any cachet here. We'll tell you what's going to happen. Omar Khan is your boss. And Mike McCarthy probably said, where do I sign? I don't have any other opportunities. I want to coach the Pittsburgh Steelers. I want to coach again. Yeah, I'm in, even knowing all of that. But if they told that to Chris Shula, if they told that to Anthony Weaver, if they told that to other younger coaches, even maybe a Brian Flores who's in his 40s, of course, worked under Tomlin briefly and former head coach, had some success early with Miami. I kind of think that'd be a Tomlin duplicate, but at least he'd be a younger coach you can build with. And there were some that liked that hire. I kind of might have been indifferent on it. But even if they told this to Brian Flores, who then, of course, re-signed with the Vikings as their DC, but if he got a head coaching opportunity, he could have got out of that deal. It wasn't forcing him to stay there, but just giving an opportunity to stay with Minnesota if he didn't get a head coach job, which it looks like he's probably not now. But they may have said, Brian Flores may have said, Chris Shula may have said, Anthony Weaver maybe would have said, yeah, we want a coach. Yeah, we want a job. Yeah, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. But there's no quarterback. The draft position's not great. The roster's really, really flawed. The expectations are probably out of whack now. A Hall of Fame coach, Mike Tomlin, is going to go to the Hall of Fame someday, despite the last 10 years being rough. The resume is what it is. I've detailed it on past shows. We are going to replace a Hall of Fame coach. Maybe this isn't great. Maybe we're still going to make the same money elsewhere or more. We're going to pick our spots, either go somewhere else as a head coach or wait as a coordinator, wait for a better situation, wait for more of an investment from the ownership in this modern era. They may say, we don't care about the 70s, the 90s, the early, the mid-2000s. We're talking about now. And now, your Steeler franchise is in neutral. You're 10-7. You're in neutral. You're not going to win any championship. You're getting blown out to the Texans, who then lose the week after in embarrassing fashion. Teams expose teams that expose you. That's been the last several years. It's not a perfect job. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's good parts about it, of course, but it's not the perfect job. If you're not going to pay us, if, say, the Browns are going to pay us more, despite that being a dumpster fire in and of itself, I'm not sold on Shador. They need a quarterback. Granted, they pick higher in the draft. Myles Garrett's there, but who knows how long he'll be there. They probably should actually move him, but they never will. That roster's flawed, of course. They were awful this past year again. But if they're going to pay way more, if they're going to build a staff, if they're going to invest, if they're going to be more modern thinking despite their stupid personality tests, maybe a coach can be persuaded to rather do that. The Cardinals, the Raiders, of course. The Raiders are very modern thinking with their staff and the money they're going to spend. Their facility is the damn Taj Mahal. Way nicer than Steelers. Sharing a freaking thing with Pitt. In the South Side. Small as hell. Even on the outside, it's a college program on the other side you're sharing with. You're the freaking Pittsburgh Steelers. It looks bad. It feels bad. It's not comparable to the rest of the NFL or much of the NFL. They may say, I'd rather have that facility. I'd rather go to Vegas. Yeah, they're in the suburbs with their facility, but look at the damn thing. That's modern. Not you. Not what you're doing. Maybe that's said. Maybe they heard those feelers from an agent, from Chris Shula, whoever. This was discussed with John Phillips on Steel City Sunday when I popped on. Was with him throughout the season, and then we did a pod here after the reaction. He brought that up, and maybe it's legit. Maybe they heard from those guys, certainly Shula, who was a lot of people's number one. This isn't going to work. The money's not there. The staff's not there. The investment's not there. The job's risky. Nah, I'd rather wait these other franchises out or stay as a coordinator, take another job, whatever. And then they landed on McCarthy because they got told no from their top guy, and they didn't love anybody else. Maybe that's the reality. That's a hit. That's an ego hit. That's embarrassing to the Steelers. It didn't have to be that way. If they would just modernize themselves, if they would spend more to the staff, if they would make the staff bigger, I know the ownership situation, they can't just pick the kick pit out, as ridiculous as that is. I get all of that. But if they would find a way to get a better facility, they could even say, Pitt, you can have this damn thing. We're going to go to Cranberry. No, you don't want to have the stadium there. You don't want to play your games in Cranberry if you're the Steelers, but you can have your facility out there. That's, players would probably rather do that than go to the South Side and fight that traffic. That's fine. Put your facility somewhere else. That's common in the NFL. The Raiders, again, I bring up, they have the facility in the suburbs. It's not the end of the world for the facility to be in the suburbs. Just don't put the stadium there. They could do that. They could work towards that. They could work for just say, Pitt, you have it. We're going to get a better facility, at least, even if we're still sharing a stadium. But instead of any of that happening, any whimper of any of that happening, the Pittsburgh Steelers go to the cheapest guy, the guy that had no leverage. Forget his age. The guy that had no leverage. Mike McCarthy had no leverage. Bring him aboard. Tell him it's going to be status quo. Tell him it's going to be Steelers' way. He has no way of saying anything but, where do I sign? He can't push back. He has no leverage. Everybody else would have had some. They could have pushed back and said, no, I'll take this other job unless you're going to do this, this, and this. Mike McCarthy couldn't say that to Art Rooney II. He had no other offer. He had no other job to take. That might be the biggest problem here. That might be how we get here. That might be the Steelers' way. That might be what they're stuck in. Again, Mike Asti here. Mic drop, reacting to the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy. And it also tells me one thing, and it's pretty freaking clear. This is a guiding light. This is a, for anybody doubting this. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Art Rooney II, were clearly not nearly as fed up or frustrated with the end of the Mike Tomlin tenure as the fans. Clearly. Not only did he say that he would have brought Mike Tomlin back for one more year, some didn't believe it at the time. I always did. From what I've heard, from what I've watched, from what I know, from what this franchise has been telling me, and all of you in their actions over words. A Steeler phrase from the Hoop Collective from Brian Windhurst and Company. Action over words. The Steelers' actions are they're sticking to the Steelers' way despite now doing it with an older coach. The Steelers' actions are that the Steelers' way will always be the way, and they're sticking to that Steelers' way despite now doing it with an older coach with a very similar track record to the guy that just stepped down, and that's it. If they were going to bring back Mike Tomlin, then I guess why not? And that's what's clear here. If you're going to bring back Mike Tomlin, maybe this makes sense for you. But clearly they were. Clearly they were fine. If you're going to hire Mike McCarthy, a guy with a very similar track record and resume to Mike Tomlin, then clearly you were willing to bring back Mike Tomlin, who has the similar resume and track record, and just go at it one more year with actually still a younger coach, despite being there forever. Clearly, for all the fans who just wanted something new, wanted a jolt of energy, maybe a younger coach, maybe somebody else you can build with, to feel like you did in 2007 when Mike Tomlin came aboard, despite that being a surprising hire, or in 92 when Bill Cowher came aboard. And that was a local guy. Sure, that's fine. Mike Tomlin was not. They both won a championship. People kind of both got sick of it towards the end, or at different points, at least. Certainly Mike Tomlin towards the end. Feeling the same way Packers fans felt at the end of Mike McCarthy's tenure there, despite the championship, and the same way Cowboys fans felt at the end of his tenure there, with a lack of playoff success, despite regular season wins. And of course, Dallas, facility-wise, stadium-wise, ownership-wise, money-wise, resources-wise, staff-wise, they're investing. It hasn't worked for them in terms of deep playoff runs in 30 years, but all that Mike McCarthy got from the outside of investment, facility-wise, resources-wise, he's not going to have in Pittsburgh. That's modern. This is not. And you almost might as well just had one more year of Mike Tomlin. I know he stepped down, but you might as well have had one more year with Mike Tomlin. Might as well continued on with Mike Tomlin if you were going to bring in Mike Tomlin 2.0, who's older. You basically replace Mike Tomlin with Mike Tomlin, who's older. An older version of Mike Tomlin is what you have now in Pittsburgh. Again, Mike Asti here, Mike Drop with Believe, available everywhere you get your podcasts and on SiriusXM. I see many of you here in the chat as I am now reacting to the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy. Just have a black and gold there emoji. We'll check now to X. That's the most recent reaction there. We'll see what else we got. This hire just made Bob Nutting the second most hated owner in the city of Pittsburgh. I mean, there are many people, Steeler fans, that are fed up with Art Rooney II and feel like it's just the status quo and he's trying to fool people and this is Mike Tomlin again. And clearly he wasn't fed up and all of that. Everything I just said is all true. I get the annoyance of Art Rooney II. Obviously not even close to Bob Nutting. Bob Nutting takes the cake still. Bob Nutting will always take the cake as long as he's the owner. It's not the same. Bob Nutting is still the worst owner in town. Maybe Art Rooney II is second. It is definitely Bob Nutting still, for sure. Giving minimal help to Paul Skeens up until maybe this offseason, you could argue. No. We'll see what happens at the end of Skeens. Bob Nutting has grown no positive regards and earned any ill will in his direction the last, decade plus, especially since the end of breaking up that 2015 team a year too soon, really. Not the same. That's funny, but Bob Nutting still has that win. How much of that was due to the owner's power? This is talking about Mike McCarthy's failures to win playoff games in Dallas. I mean, obviously Jerry Jones has been a problem there for 30 years. It's different. It's a different rule system than when he could just buy and do whatever he wanted with the roster. Now there's free agency. Now there's a cap. Now there's different rules and parameters that he hasn't been able to deal with well and manage well. And he's had issues with coaches, all of that didn't exist in the early 90s when he had that dynasty off his oil money. But Mike McCarthy still has made poor decisions, has still capped out in the playoffs. He still was losing playoff games toward the end of his Green Bay tenure before even getting to Jerry Jones. The resume is the resume, and it's not been good enough for a while since his early tenure with the Packers. They traded a coach who hadn't had a losing season in 18 years, 19, by the way, for a coach that had 2 losing seasons in 5 years. Yep, that's the thing. While Mike Tomlin and Mike McCarthy's resumes are very, very similar throughout their entire careers, and Mike McCarthy does have a more recent playoff win, Mike McCarthy has also had the dip of losing seasons, whereas Mike Tomlin has at least been consistent. And if somebody would tell you, gun to your head, who next year with this team is going to have a better regular season record, are they going to have the same record? Mike Tomlin's would be better, or Mike McCarthy's would be better. Dare I say it either be the same or maybe Mike Tomlin's would be better. Mike Tomlin's proven that he can at least get you wins at the end of the year, can get you crawling in the postseason, can get something out of, nothing in a way. He's underachieved a lot in his career, losing in the playoffs with the Triple Bs and having a defense that underperforms with stars. But he also overachieved at times with the 2019 team that almost got in the postseason with Duck and Mason, with a team a year ago that got in the postseason, even arguably this year team that got in the postseason with a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers at the time. So can Mike McCarthy do the same thing? I mean, they probably would have similar records in the regular season. They both would have similar results in the playoffs. It'd be the similar story that it's been for the last handful of years for both of them. It'd be very, very similar. Indifferent maybe would be the answer too. It might be this. It might just be whatever, or it also might be the same. Any of those options are fine, but it feels very much the same. Mike McCarthy feels very much like a Mike Tomlin situation, which I think is the angst of the fans here. And he's an older version of Mike Tomlin. He's going to be around for only a short period of time. You're not going to build with him. This does go off script. So you replace Mike Tomlin with Mike Tomlin 2.0, who's older. That says it, really. And that's the tip of the iceberg here. That says it all. That's the biggest issue here. A lot of thanks Art in sarcasm, I'd imagine. Second oldest roster in the league, and yeah, that got to change. The defense highest paid with older stars that underperformed. That was the problem, of course, in 2025. And before I wrap this up now, somebody here, you think this was about trying to bring Rodgers back? I do want to touch on that. So again, Mike Drop here with Believe and SiriusXM reacting to the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy. One Mike for another Mike. 2 similar mics. Separate from their age, again, which I cannot get over. I do not believe, I don't believe, I can't believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers are hiring Mike McCarthy just to bring back Aaron Rodgers, and that's it. I can't buy it. I can't believe it. It would be ridiculous and insane. It would be the dumbest decision in the history of the franchise, and that is saying something. And I am telling you that Aaron Rodgers has been the best quarterback the Steelers have had in the last 5 years since Ben, even back to the end of Ben. Maybe that's an indictment of who's been here, but still, the bar wasn't high and Rodgers did exceed it. That Rodgers was a success in 2025. He did get them in the playoffs. No, they didn't win a playoff game. That's similar, but still got them there. Played better ball, was more of a leader, wasn't the locker room problem, didn't go on McAfee too much, didn't throw anybody under the bus, was a coach on the field in a way, was a joy to deal with in the media. The whole 2025 experience with Aaron Rodgers was a win. And most people who have talked with him in the media will tell you they wish they could have covered him his whole career because they enjoyed it. He lived up to everything he agreed to. He wouldn't provide the drama. He wouldn't do the McAfee show. It wouldn't be like the Jets. He's not trying to be GM. He just wants to play ball. All of that went down under Mike Tomlin in 2025. They did get in the postseason, and then they lost. But he's now 42 years old. And you can't imagine he's going to be better than he just was. And what he just was better than they've had in 5 years, but not Pro Bowl, great, near good enough to win you any type of championship based on who's in the division, the conference, the league. Those younger quarterbacks are the ones getting it done, or the rosters are legit. Their roster's flawed, and they don't have that young stud. They're also not going to probably pick him at pick 21 in the draft because they're never bad enough to get that guy, of course. Happened again. So this is not really a criticism of Rodgers off this past season, but to make a decision on a head coach who has a 5-year deal that even though he's older and won't be there forever because of probably one more year with a quarterback and a 42-year-old player, I don't care who the hell he is, would be madness, would be insane, would be flat out stupid. It just would. It just would. I can't buy that was the reasoning here. I have to buy that it's one of many reasons. That either they were really impressed with what Mike McCarthy had to say, that they kind of wanted to go cheap here and they didn't want to spend tons on him or the staff. They didn't want to modernize the staff. They didn't want to add to the staff. They didn't want to do things to the facility or whatever they could like other franchises because that's the Steelers' way. They're stuck in their ways, and Mike McCarthy is the one with no leverage who would agree to all of that, whereas the other candidates maybe push back or ask questions. Mike McCarthy did not ask questions and said, I'm in on whatever you offer. I don't have any other opportunities, and this is my dream job. Maybe the local thing you get thrown in there too. He does have a track record despite being an older coach. They normally don't like that, but Omar Khan wasn't making the previous hires. Maybe he does like the ring on McCarthy's finger that he wore to the facility. Those have to be the reasons. The reason cannot be that regardless of it all, that because Mike McCarthy has the best relationship with Aaron Rodgers out of all the candidates, and really out of anybody not named Mike Tomlin, who just stepped down and obviously wouldn't be your coach, is why he comes aboard. And if somebody else had a better relationship with Rodgers and Rodgers would come back for somebody else, then they would hire that guy. That can't be it. And while I don't think they're going to draft the guy in this coming draft, and really the year after is a better and deeper quarterback class, probably. They're not getting Mendoza after that. It's a crapshoot. And even him might be. Great call of success does not always translate, especially with his style, for a hot take. But that can't be the reason. Maybe it was nice. Maybe it is nice. I do know, and it has been said that they would welcome him back. They wouldn't be against Rodgers one more year to kind of lead a rookie quarterback, help groom him, which Rodgers didn't want to do in Green Bay with Jordan Love and was mad about when they asked Brett Favre to do that for him, and Favre said no. So some hypocrisy there from Rodgers over his career. But Rodgers isn't really that guy. And he wouldn't play forever, so he would know, and it wouldn't be really a threat. Obviously, Rodgers comes back. He's probably going to be the starter. The rookie wouldn't be great enough, wouldn't be ready enough, wouldn't be the guy, especially the late-round pick. He'd come aboard and he would learn for one more year. Okay. But you don't make a decision on a head coach for many, many more years beyond just one off of Aaron Rodgers at his age, off of how he just played, which was still up and down despite being better than what they've had. This is not Rodgers in his prime. This is not the Bills making decisions for Josh Allen, who's in his prime still. Rodgers is a decade plus older than Josh Allen. No, you don't make a decision for a head coach on a quarterback at that age, no matter who he is. You don't. You're invested in this more than 1 year with Mike McCarthy, despite his age. Got to be more than one more year. You don't have a quick trigger, so even if it's a bad year, you're going to stick with him. No, I cannot buy that. I cannot buy the Steelers would hire Mike McCarthy just to appease Aaron Rodgers. And if they did, which again, I can't buy, I've not heard, isn't the case. If they did, though, that's dumb. That's insane. That's ludicrous. That's asinine. Anything else you want me to name? Any other descriptive term there? Feel free to plug it in. It'll work too. That can't be part of this. It can be a nice bonus if you want one more year, and I wouldn't mind one more year. That would be it, but can't be the reason. But in all reality, hiring Mike McCarthy with a similar resume to Mike Tomlin, a similar track record to Mike Tomlin, a similar recent memory to Mike Tomlin, older than Mike Tomlin, and then maybe bringing back Aaron Rodgers again, his quarterback from when he beat you in the Super Bowl with Green Bay, who's also now 40 plus and too damn old to stay there long, and just coming off an up and down year. It's kicking the can down the freaking road again. The Pittsburgh Steelers are still kicking this freaking can. They kicked it at the end of Ben. They kicked it through the last 5 years, and they're kicking it now. They kicked it towards the end of Mike Tomlin. They kick it now the beginning of Mike McCarthy. They're kicking the can down the road, even with the draft in Pittsburgh. And there's only so much you can do with where they're drafting because of the last year that Tomlin had. But still, you're bringing in Tomlin again, Tomlin 2.0, who's older, and maybe the same freaking quarterback that he knows well, of course, who's also freaking old for a QB. Not everyone's Brady, who's going to do this for 3 or 4 more years at his age and go to 45. No, Rodgers is not doing that, nor do you want him to do that. You don't have that kind of team that Brady had around him either. Don't have that offensive line, don't have that team. Brady's team in Tampa was stacked. That was the perfect fit for that situation for an older QB. And Brady, better than Rodgers. Certainly now that Rodgers is not mobile. You could argue the mobility had him an edge early in their careers, but not now. I mean, that's in closing here. It just feels like the Mike McCarthy hire is a stale one, is a boring one, is not an exciting one, is no jolt or injection of energy at all. He's Mike Tomlin 2.0, but older. We'll see what he does with the staff. We'll see the money spent to him, spent to the staff. We'll see what happens outside the salary cap and what they do staff-wise. I'm skeptical it'll be anything special, because that's probably part of this. It feels like the guy with no leverage that would have agreed to anything. You gave the job before you even could offer it or talk to others. I don't understand the logic other than a stopgap. It might be a stopgap. Clearly it is. It's going to be probably a bridge to the next guy. The next coach of the Steelers who wins a championship will probably not be the succession of these 3 in a row of Noel, Cowher, Tomlin. It'll stop with McCarthy. The next guy maybe will do it. Maybe that next guy will be younger. Maybe they didn't know the answer before that next guy. But that run is probably done. The roster isn't ready. He's old. He's not going to get there for 15 years to try it out. Cowher didn't win until the end. It's not going to be a situation where you can go 15 years and then win. McCarthy's not going to do this at 75, late 70s. That would be nuts, obviously. Maybe he'll win some regular season games. Maybe it won't be horrible. Maybe he'll do the Dallas thing and have 3 straight 12-win seasons. Maybe they'll get in the playoffs and even win 1 playoff game. They're not going to go far, though. Who knows? That'll feel like more of the same of Mike Tomlin. And the Steelers didn't mind it, clearly. They did not mind the end of Mike Tomlin because they hired Mike McCarthy. The Pittsburgh Steelers clearly were not fed up with Mike Tomlin. They were not frustrated with the Mike Tomlin tenure. They were not upset over that last decade. They looked at division titles. They looked at getting in. They looked at not having a chance to win anything near of a title as good enough. And the Steelers' way now. When it'll never be for the fans. And they brought in the guy that can do that. They brought in the guy that's been doing that. They brought in the guy that mirrors Mike Tomlin. If they were fed up with Mike Tomlin's resume the last 10 years, if they were fed up with 7 straight playoff losses and 5 straight blowout losses in the postseason and 10-7 but never having a shot, they would have hired a younger coach who could exceed what they were sick of, even hit the ground running early like Tomlin did many years ago. They would have tried to find the next Mike Tomlin in his 30s. They certainly might have went into the 40s, but not any older. And as I talked about earlier, by the way, maybe they couldn't get those guys. Maybe those guys said they don't like the facility situation. They don't like the money situation. You're not going to spend on the staff. You're not going to bring more of a staff in. Other franchises are more modern than you. We don't like the job. The roster's flawed. Yes, it's the Steelers, but we don't want it. Maybe they heard those things and they landed on Mike McCarthy. That's not good either. That's a hit to the ego in the franchise too. And yeah, X and O's wise, maybe we'll do this for another show. Mike McCarthy maybe can help the running game. Yes, he can maybe help a quarterback, whoever they would bring in. Maybe he could even help Will Howard, and I'll throw that bomb out there. I don't think Will Howard's going to be the guy. They didn't draft him to be the guy. Some people are in love with him, think he's the next Ben. Just because he won a national title at Ohio State doesn't prove that. Watch his Kansas State film, by the way. You know, there's reason to not buy into to Will Howard, too, before he even gets a shot. But maybe Mike McCarthy will help him and give him the best shot. Maybe he could do the most out of nothing with a roster that's not yet there. In the regular season, like Tomlin was kind of doing, maybe you could take Tomlin's 10 wins and win 12. Maybe you think he'd win more regular season games at minimum than Tomlin in recent years. Kind of was. Okay. But at 62 years old, is he going to be there to see that finish, see the fruits of that labor, if that's the case, and actually go the next mile? Probably not. And that's the kicker there. The Steelers have a lot of regular season victories since the merger, by the way, is meaningless. That includes the 70s. That includes before free agency. That includes when you're on a team and you get drafted there. You're on that team forever. That includes, I mean, obviously the Steelers franchise is historic, is great, has the championships, has the Hall of Famers, had the legends. It's not like this is a bad franchise. You're going to go way, way back. Of course, there were great years. There was a dynasty there. We got it. And there's been regular season even wins in recent memory in that last decade plus as well. The playoff wins haven't been there the last 10 years, the last 9 years. 7 straight playoff losses. They weren't in those games. 5 straight playoff blowout losses is a NFL record. It's an NFL record. NFL record. Mike McCarthy is more of the same of Mike Tomlin. We will see if that ends up as a different situation. And for any of the other names brought up here in the chat, Marcus Freeman, others, yeah, I don't know why they had to make this decision before Chris Shule and others were available to at least bring him in the building, unless they were already told no. Unless they were already told no by those guys through an agent or whoever, which is a hit, and it's possible. Freeman, college coach, great college coach. I don't know. There haven't been that many great college coaches to work out in the NFL. Honestly, Jimmy Johnson did. Pete Carroll did. He was NFL actually before USC, though, so it depends on whether you count him. Barry Switzer, I guess, did, but he took over a great dynasty team with the Cowboys. Wasn't really him. Not many. There's been some, not many. I mean, many great college coaches didn't work out. Look at Nick Saban. There's no guarantee there. It goes off script. Maybe that's good. Maybe X's and O's wise, it can be okay. Maybe he'll get something out of this season, out of this roster, whatever it looks like, and have the regular season be as best as it can be the best that it can be. Maybe. It feels like a Mike Tomlin situation. Tomlin probably could have done that too. This screams they weren't really fed up with Tomlin because they're replacing him with the same guy. That what McCarthy's put up and even had at Dallas, they're fine with if you're the Steelers. They don't want to build with somebody as odd as that is because they used to always do that. And this could even be a hit to Mike McCarthy's legacy if he's trying to fight it for the Hall of Fame. This is a risky job. The roster's bad, and you're going to be booed pretty quickly probably in this thing, despite being from there. It's about winning. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter where your dad worked. Doesn't matter, where you went to school. Doesn't matter where you worked when you started his coaching career. Doesn't matter what bar you went to. Win on the field. Win in the playoffs. Or the fan base is gonna tune it off, and they're gonna say that you're Mike Tomlin again. That's what the fan base has just been fed up with. You wanted something new, and I don't know if you really got it. So that'll do it for my live instant reaction. I got to see more of the staff. I got to see what they fully spent. I know it's a 5-year deal. We got to see if they really build on this staff and it gets bigger because a lot of these staffs in major college football and the NFL are way bigger than what the Steelers do. Steelers are freaking cheap on the staff. Do they not get cheap on the staff? Do they finally not penny pinch on the staff? How does this roster look? What do they do in the draft? All of that is a major deal here and a major part of this. But Mike McCarthy feels like a Mike Tomlin repeat, an older version. They hire somebody that nobody expected again. Nobody expected Mike Tomlin way back. They do that again. People knew McCarthy would be interviewed, but no one really expected he would get the job. Outside of that, it's a different hire. It's a different vibe. It's not connected to anything you would imagine is good or what you would want. It's different than what other franchises are doing with the younger coaches, the young up and comers. They're not doing that now. They have the second oldest coach in football. And Andy Reid could retire at any moment. Then McCarthy would be that guy. So I don't like the move. if you haven't noticed, we will see what happens. Though obviously this is an instant reaction. Maybe I'll like it in a few days. Maybe I'll hear more news and feel differently. I don't know. Right now, not feeling it. Not excited. There's no jolt of energy or injection of life into this fan base. There's more frustration. They're fed up with the status quo even more and have ventured into now anger. That's where Steelers fans are. That's where a lot of them are. Art Rooney II. Did you go cheap? Did you go easy? Did you go safe? Feels that way. Did you want to go cheap again? Do you not want to do the things the other coaches are asking you to do? Did you go to the guy who has no leverage because you knew that he couldn't answer any, couldn't ask any questions, could take any answer you give him, would agree to anything just to do it, just to be your coach, just to get back on the sideline with your team? You were his dream job. He'd do whatever at his age. Is that part of this? If it is, that's bad. What is your standard? Is the Tomlin end of those losing playoff games, of 10-7s, of not competing really, not being in the championship picture at all? Is that your standard now? Is that good enough? That's McCarthy too. We will see. That'll do it for this edition of Mike Drop here, a live reaction to the Mike McCarthy hire by the Steelers. Find this episode everywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. You can also find it on the Believe Network main page by searching Mike Drop there. Hit it up. Find me on social at MikeOfsey11 everywhere on social media. You can also find, of course, the Believe Network shows via Sirius XM. The Steelers hire Mike McCarthy, hire a Mike Tomlin 2.0, but older hire. I don't like it, but there are things we need to wait and see about to fully evaluate this hire.